Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Virtual Grand Canyon Star Party. I'm Ranger Raider Lane, the National Park Service coordinator for the event. And for 30 years running, Grand Canyon has been celebrating our pristine night skies through this event we call the Grand Canyon Star Party. Ordinarily, we invite hundreds of astronomers and thousands upon thousands of visitors to the park to enjoy 8 nights of some of the most pristine night skies in the United States. Each evening is typically kicked off with one of our special guest speakers in our theater, and that's followed by telescope viewing, constellation tours, night sky photography workshops, and much, much more. Next year's Grand Canyon Star Party is June 5th through the 12th, 2021. So mark your calendars and cross your fingers that we'll be able to celebrate that on site next year. This year, we're bringing you a taste of the Grand Canyon Star Party in the virtual realm. We kind of want to try to mirror how a night of Grand Canyon Star Party might unfold on site. So we're lucky to have each evening with one of our special guest speakers present their programs from June 13th through the 20th. They're all willing to share their talks online with us this year, so we're really lucky to have them. We're also excited to bring you some of the wonders of the summer sky into your homes with our virtual telescope viewing sessions that will premiere right after this program, so stay tuned for that. But before we introduce our special guests this evening, I just have a couple entities the National Park Service would like to thank for their support in the event. First, I want to thank Grand Canyon Conservancy. Now, they're the park's official nonprofit partner, and they're doing all sorts of amazing things for the park. Some of their current priorities include trail restoration, the Desert View Intertribal Heritage Site, which is an amazing revolutionary project unfolding at the Desert View Watchtower area. They fund research and education in the park. And of course, one of their top priorities is night sky preservation. So through the generous support of Grand Canyon Conservancy and all their supporters, Grand Canyon National Park was able to inventory over 5,000 lights in the park over the last few years. We were able to retrofit or change out over 1,500 of those fixtures to be night sky friendly. We have plans to change out many, many more as we go into the future. And this allowed us in 2019 to become certified as an international dark sky park. And that makes us undoubtedly one of the largest, most complex, highly visited international dark sky parks in the world. Now, that very same year in 2019, the park was awarded the distinction of International Dark Sky Place of the Year by the International Dark Sky Association. Now, they're the nonprofit entity that certifies parks and communities as international dark sky places, among a whole host of other things that they do. In fact, the International Dark Sky Association's mission is to preserve and protect the nighttime environment and our heritage of dark skies through environmentally responsible outdoor lighting. We thank the International Dark Sky Association and their tremendous staff, and we hope they keep up the great work. Finally, Grand Canyon's International Dark Sky Place of the Year could not have been achieved without the dedication, the passion, and the expertise of the Tucson Amateur Astronomy Association. They're our essential partner for putting on the Grand Canyon Star Party each year. Now, in our virtual Star Party following this presentation, please thank the astronomers in the chat room. They're going to be populating the chat room, answering questions. And you know, they do this out of pure love of the night skies on a volunteer basis. The National Park Service is really proud to work with them in this endeavor. Now with that, I want to introduce tonight's special guest speaker. Tonight, we're really lucky to have Betty Maya Foote with us. Betty Maya is the Director of Engagement at the International Dark Sky Association. She graduated from the University of Utah Honors Program with an HBS in Environmental and Sustainability Studies. Her main thesis entitled Light Pollution Hazards Within Ecosystems and Mitigation Strategies for the Future. Her dark sky career began working for Utah State Parks as a dark sky intern and then as a seasonal employee. She started 12 international dark sky park applications across the state. She then worked as coordinator for the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative and the Consortium for Dark Sky Studies at the University of Utah. Betty Maya is an accomplished astrophotographer, and she teaches night sky photography workshops around the Colorado Plateau and beyond. Tonight, Betty Maya will present Getting Started with Astrophotography, and we're really lucky to have her. Betty Maya, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Raider. What a great intro, and you are so amazing. It's going to be hard to follow your excitement and enthusiasm. And I just want to thank you and Grand Canyon and all the supporters for the amazing work you do to protect dark skies and to promote enjoyment of natural dark nighttime environments. So thanks,
Betty Maya,
for all that you do. And I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So I have put together a brief video on astrophotography for beginners that I will play for you guys. It's about 3.5 minutes or something. And then after that, I'll go into a more in-depth PowerPoint presentation on some of the techniques discussed within. So we'll go ahead and get that started. Pull it up. Okay, share screen. All right, can you see that? All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here we go. Hi, I'm Betty Maya Foote. Welcome to Astrophotography for Beginners. Let's get started.
You can capture images of the night sky with any camera that has fully manual settings on a tripod using your 2-second timer. You'll need to adjust your shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Set your shutter speed to the longest setting on your camera to start. 30 seconds might reveal streaks of light rather than pinpoint stars. Adjust to a lower setting until stars become points. Set your aperture as wide as possible, so the smallest number. For ISO, 6400 is a good place to start. A higher ISO will give you more sensitivity to light, but will cause increased noise, so find a happy medium between noise and exposure. All of these settings are a starting point. You'll need to mess around with the settings to find an exposure you're happy with. White balance while shooting is not so important if you shoot in RAW. That image type will give you the most amount of data to work with when editing your pictures. Typically, though, I end up around 4250 for Milky Way and around 5000 or 5500 Kelvin for moonlight. Focusing is one of the hardest parts of astrophotography. To find the correct focus, use manual focus. Roughly pre-focus your lens to infinity and enable live view. Center on something distant and bright. Use the camera display to zoom in as far as you can. Adjust your focus until the bright object you selected becomes as small as possible. A good sign that you're approaching focus is if you see dim stars appearing in the viewfinder. If you do not have live view, preset your lens to infinity, take an image, review and adjust the focus, and repeat the shot until you achieve a sharp image. Don't forget about natural sources of light at night. Light from the moon may seem dim, but it actually can dramatically alter the scene. Moonlight will reduce the contrast of the night sky, obscuring the fainter celestial objects. During a full moon, your image will appear to be a sunny midday afternoon, but with stars, which is pretty cool. And just remember, the new moon is the best time to capture faint celestial objects like the Milky Way. This can also be achieved if the moon has set. And a crescent moon will give you the best of both worlds. To preserve your night vision, use a red headlamp and turn your camera's LCD display brightness down. Bring warm clothes. Warm days can be followed by cold nights. Tell someone where you're going and when you plan to return. Review all current regulations about photography on protected lands and access after hours if shooting in a park area. Remember to check the weather. Sometimes a cloudy night can become clear. If there are other astrophotographers in the area where you are shooting, ask them before you start light painting or using artificial light to see what you are doing. Even small amounts of stray light can be a detriment to an image of the night sky and others' night vision. But most importantly, have fun. Let your passion for the night sky inspire others.
Thanks so much for joining Astrophotography for Beginners. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on Instagram at bettymaya.foot or on my website at bettymayafoot.com. Also, please check out darksky.org for more information on how you can protect dark skies. Thank you again. I'm Betty Maya Foote and wishing you clear dark skies for shooting. Okay, we're starting again. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Astrophotography for Beginners or Getting Started in Astrophotography or Astrophotography 101, whichever sounds less scary. My aim is to make astrophotography accessible for everyone and to help you all get started with taking pictures of the night sky. So let's get started. And I always start my presentations with this quote, only when it is dark enough can we see the stars. But today, this quote has two meanings for me. It speaks to another important aspect of this work, which is acknowledging that this presentation is being recorded during a time of worldwide protest about the murder of George Floyd and the systemic racism in our culture today. In my experience as a woman, I have found that nighttime public spaces are not always safe for me. And we should also challenge ourselves to consider how they might not be safe for people of color. It's important to work to increase the access to public spaces like Grand Canyon and specifically places at night. So really, only when it is dark enough, safe enough, and accessible enough can we all see the stars and appreciate them while feeling safe. It's a privilege to be out in the dark at night in public spaces. And it is something that we are losing drastically. A lot of people have never seen the Milky Way. And for a lot of people, astrophotography may be their only experience of seeing the Milky Way. Our social media coordinator for IDA has never seen the Milky Way. It's a very common experience in our world today to grow up without access to natural dark nighttime environments. Over 99% of the United States and Europe live under light polluted skies, and 80% of the entire world's population. So this is something that we are losing. We're losing quickly. Light pollution is increasing at a rate of 2% per year, and that's a low end estimate. And it's not really hard to imagine a future where we may have no natural darkness remaining. There's a couple different types of light pollution. The first is sky glow, and that is the dome of light you'll see along the horizon that obscures our view of the night sky. So here we're at a star party in Oracle State Park looking towards Tucson, and we can see the bright dome of light is Tucson on the right there, but to the left, those dark skies are revealing the Milky Way. Glare is another aspect of light pollution. The best way to describe this is imagine driving on a lonely country road and somebody comes towards you and they have their headlights on bright. You've experienced glare. That's when that light comes into your eye at a horizontal angle and causes visual discomfort and pain. As well as light trespass. So anytime light from somebody else's property is falling onto yours or into your bedroom window at night, that's light pollution, and that is light trespass. And we can think of light trespass actually as a private property rights issue. Somebody else's light from their property should not be trespassing onto your property or into your own home. And this is just a local example. I live in Tucson, and we can see that even in the past few years, the light pollution has increased dramatically. So this is an issue that we really, really need to be working on addressing into the future if we want to protect and preserve beautiful dark skies like we have at Grand Canyon National Park. But luckily, photography is a great way to protect, preserve, and connect to dark skies. Photography is used within the national park system to monitor the quality of dark skies. So these images were taken by the Natural Sounds and Night Skies Division of the National Park Service with a CCD camera. These are panoramic images taken of the full sky. And you can see the top image is all of the light sources at night, including the stars and natural light from the sky, such as air glow or zodiacal light. And this bottom image is all of the natural sources of light pollution, of light at night subtracted. So we're just left with the domes of artificial light on the ground. And that really helps us to determine how they're growing, how they're changing, and what we can do to mitigate them. It's also a great tool to document sky glow. So here we have a panorama taken from Dead Horse Point State Park, which is also an international dark sky park. And people always ask me if this was taken during sunrise. I think it was about 3 a.m., so it definitely wasn't sunrise, but that dome of light in the middle is actually from the small town of Moab, which is my hometown. And it's super bright for a really small rural town in Utah. It's surprising how much light can come even from a small town. And photography is also useful in documenting changes of lighting. So here we see before and after of unshielded versus shielded lighting. And if you particularly note the amount of light in the trees, as well as the amount of light on the ground. So in the before picture, the trees are super lit up, and also on the ground, there's a lot of harsh shadows and really bright contrast of light and dark. But after those fixtures were changed to fully shielded fixtures, we can see the trees and the surrounding area are much darker, and the lighting on the ground is actually a lot more uniform and easy to see and navigate. And photography is used to protect and promote dark skies and to connect people to the movement. So here we have an IDA delegate, Joyce Harmon, who has used photography in an incredible way to spread awareness in Rappahannock County, Virginia. So she received a grant to go and photograph homes with the Milky Way and then print out those images and share them with the homeowners. And you can imagine if you get a beautiful image of the Milky Way behind your house, you're gonna kind of want to protect those skies and keep them dark. So it's been a really inspiring project to show how we can use astrophotography to connect people to the mission of dark skies and working to combat light pollution globally. Okay, so now that we have gotten through all of the dark sky stuff, we're gonna get to what you're all here for, which is how we can capture pictures of the night. So this is where we are. If you're in astrophotography, you're probably gonna try to capture images of the Milky Way galaxy. During the summer, we're looking towards the center here, towards the brightest part of the Milky Way galaxy, our galactic core. And during the winter, we are turned out facing away from that center into the fainter part of our Milky Way galaxy. I think that is a bit different in the southern and northern hemisphere, but I'm speaking in my northern hemisphere field of view right now. So what do you need? A DSLR or mirrorless camera. A full frame camera sensor is going to capture the most amount of light, and that's what we're trying to get as much of when we're shooting astrophotography. So if possible, full frame. But if not, any type of DSLR or mirrorless camera will capture images of the stars. Tripod is very necessary. You're gonna wanna make sure it's sturdy and not shaking in the wind. Wide angle lenses are great for capturing our Milky Way. You're gonna want probably 50 millimeter or wider, which would be a smaller number, and then a fast lens. And that means a wide aperture. So anything f2.8 or smaller number is gonna be a really great lens, but even if you only have a lens that goes down to 3.5, you'll still be able to capture images of the stars, maybe just not quite as detailed. And then optionally, an intervalometer or remote release are very helpful for capturing time lapses or just not getting any camera shake. So the formula, you're gonna wanna start, depending on your camera, ISO performs very differently. So if you have an older camera, you may want to use a lower ISO. But if you have a newer camera, you can really bump your ISO without getting a lot of noise. So you're just gonna wanna play around with that. Shutter speed is anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds. There's a rule of 500 that if you divide your focal length by, if you divide 500 by your focal length, you should get the amount of time in seconds that you can expose without revealing star trailing. But that's not the best method, and I don't like to do math, so I just like to take a picture and zoom in and see if my stars are dots or lines, and that's a little bit easier. So if you have a wider angle lens, you can shoot for a longer period of time without revealing that star trailing. But if you have a closer lens, like a 50 or even a 35 millimeter, even 10 seconds can reveal star trailing. So just be aware of that. Aperture, you're going to want to shoot with your aperture as wide as possible to capture the most amount of light. So that's going to be the smallest number. And then white balance, 4250 to 4600 for Milky Way, and then around 5000 for moonlight. And be sure you're shooting in the image type of RAW, because that will give you the most amount of data to work with when post-processing your images afterwards. As I noted in that video, focusing is definitely the hardest part of astrophotography. You have to be on manual focus at night. Autofocus is not smart enough to focus on a star, so always shoot in manual focus. Preset your lens to infinity, roughly around where it is. Enable your live view so that you can see on the back of your camera screen what your camera sees. Then you're going to want to center a bright distant object. Usually it's a planet or a very bright star, the brightest thing that you see in the sky. Put that in the center of your field of view. And then zoom in using your camera zoom, not your lens. So that little magnifying glass button, use that to zoom in as far as you can on that point of light. And then adjust the focus until that point of light becomes as small as it possibly can. And note when you see the dim stars appearing, that means you're approaching infinity. So finding the Milky Way is always fun. Time of year is a huge thing to think about when you're planning your shot of the Milky Way. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, we can see it in the spring, from the spring to the fall, and in wintertime, we cannot see the galactic core. You can see the Milky Way at all times of the year, but only the beautiful galactic bright center is visible spring through fall. And the position in the sky changes. So in the spring, kind of early season right now, we have a low spanning arch of the Milky Way where the core is typically east to southeast, or basically southeast to south. And then as we get later into the summer, the Milky Way will move more south to southwest, and it'll be more of a vertical Milky Way, kind of going straight up towards the zenith, as opposed to being a low arch along the horizon. And then these are just some examples of how the Milky Way differs between summer and winter. So here you can see in the summer, there's that bright, dark lanes and galactic core and, beautiful detail in the Milky Way. And in the winter, it's still beautiful, but it's fainter, it's more delicate. And I find myself focusing more on the bright constellations such as Orion or the Big Dipper, and working those into my composition as well, as opposed to just the Milky Way. And thinking about time of night is also important. So I love to shoot during what's called blue hour. And that is when the sun is, I think, 10 to 12 degrees below the horizon. And that creates a phenomenon where you get light from the sun that's lighting up the sky that makes it that beautiful rich blue color, but it's not enough light to wash out the Milky Way. So you can see those faint details in our galactic core, and it makes a really cool effect. But then you can see a similar image taken just a few hours later during true dark. Doesn't have that blue color in the night sky, but it reveals a lot of other things like the depth of color in the Milky Way, some of the green air glow, which we'll get into in a little bit. So just be aware of the time of night and how the sun can still interact with your image even when it's set. And the moon is also something to really think about when we're shooting night skies. Moonlight is super, super bright at night, and it may not seem very bright, but it will totally change the scene of your image that your camera is capturing. So here on the left, we can see an image taken during the full moon. It basically appears like daylight, but you can still see those stars in the sky. And during the full moon, you will not be able to see the Milky Way because it's just too much light, and it will wash out those faint details. And during the new moon, you'll be able to see as much of the Milky Way as possible, and any of your foreground will likely be very dark and silhouetted against the light from the Milky Way in the sky. And then this picture I took recently with 80% moonlight. So there was 82% moon here, but you can still see the Milky Way, which was really amazing. And this happens when the moon is on the other side of the sky from the Milky Way. So the moon is far enough away that it's still, lighting up the foreground, but it's letting the Milky Way shine through. So when I first started out in astrophotography, I definitely was like almost scared of the moon. I only shot during new moon nights and when it was totally dark. And recently I've just been like, oh my gosh, the moon is what's up. Like it's so beautiful. It lights your foreground for you. You don't have to worry about light painting, which usually isn't cool anyway. And still lets you see the Milky Way, and it makes the sky blue. And then you can play with moon sets and moon rises. So here we can see, will this play? Here we can see a time lapse taken during that same night. And there is the moon about to set. And you can just see how the light changes on the landscape. And when the moon sets, it's very dark. And then we have a sunrise. So the moon is definitely really fun to play with when you're shooting the night sky, and something that we should not shy away from, but I really think we need to embrace the moon more in astrophotography. Here's another fun time lapse of a moon rise instead of a moon set. This is taken at Dead Horse Point State Park in Utah. You can see our foreground is really dark until the moon begins to rise, and then it reveals an incredible foreground scene. So don't forget about the moon. And then some other fun things I like to shoot are star trails. So here we have another set of images that reveal the rotation of the Earth. So it's easy to think that it's the sky that's moving when really it's us that's turning around. If you have your camera pointed towards north, you will get these circles. That's the North Star right there in the middle. And if you are pointed towards any other directions, you'll get large arcs of stars for your star trails. That image, oops. That star trail was taken, compiled using this time lapse. So this is the unstacked version of that time lapse. And I use star stacks to create my star trails and my star trail time lapse. You can also just kind of keep your camera lens open for a few hours to capture star trails, but I like to stack mine and make mine grow and make time lapses out of it. So I tend to do stack single images on top of each other, but both ways are really valid. And I think, keeping your camera open for an hour is more like OG star trails and like real star trails. Whereas, if you're stacking them, it's kind of fake, not really, but if you want that real documentary photography, it's cool to practice just long, wide open star trails as well. And another fun thing to shoot is panoramas. So panoramas capture the whole arc of the Milky Way galaxy in one image, which is really hard to do with just one single exposure. So this is probably, I think, 8 or 9 vertical exposures that I then merged in Lightroom. So you're going to want to make sure your tripod is level. Switch your camera, to portrait mode so that it's this way instead of this way. And then you're going to take a series of images that overlap at least 50%. And then you can just bring those into Lightroom and merge them. And it's really simple. So I highly suggest everyone try out shooting panoramas. It's really rewarding. I'll go through just some of my favorites. Recently, this was taken again at Dead Horse Point State Park. And you can see some of the beautiful green airglow, green and purple airglow on the right, and the Milky Way stretching across to the left here. And then here is a blue hour panorama with a fellow photographer in the foreground. And I also really like to try to add some type of subjects to the foreground so that it adds that human element and also gives a really good sense of scale to the night sky. So that's something fun to play around with if you're looking for creative techniques in your nightscape photography. Okay, and then I've said airglow a few times, but airglow is one of my favorite things to capture. And I don't really know how to accurately explain it, but what makes sense to me is that the sun charges particles in the atmosphere during the day. And then after the sun has set, those charged particles release photons, which creates this airglow. And so if you watch this time lapse, be mindful of the colors along the horizon, and you can watch the airglow almost ripple across the night sky. One of my other favorite things to capture is meteors. So check out meteor showers if you're looking for something fun to shoot at night. I captured this in Colorado recently, and you can see this meteor here has some color to it. It's a little bit hard to see, but it's pink to green. And it's really fun to capture meteors that have that much color in them. I saw one with my own eyes that my camera didn't capture that went from bright green to bright blue, and I'd never seen that before. So something really fun to look out for when you're out at night is definitely those big bright meteors. And this was one that I captured that is very rare. So I'll zoom in a little bit closer, and you can see that this meteor is actually wiggly. And that is really, really uncommon, but is an effect that's been captured by multiple astrophotographers. And I know Babek Tafreshi is actually compiling images of wiggly meteors. So if any of you have any that you've captured out there, send them along to Babak at The World at Night. And finally, I just want to let everyone know that we have started a group for women in astrophotography, really meant to just be a celebration of women astrophotographers and help to elevate the work of women in the field. So please like, share, and follow, and support us in that. So thank you. That was my presentation.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Betty Mai. That was awesome. I just have a couple questions if you got time.
Great, yeah.
Sweet. Well, again, thank you so much. That was excellent. And in your video, you mentioned light painting. What is light painting?
Thank you for bringing that up, Raider. So light painting is when photographers will add artificial light at night to shots of the night sky in order to illuminate specific subjects in the foreground.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And tailing off that, so a lot of your images have this beautiful composition where you have some geologic feature, or like you were saying, a subject in the foreground. So how important is composition with land-based features with the night sky, and B, how much do you plan before going out and actually shooting the timing of the moon, the position of the Milky Way, and all that to get those incredible shots where you can get the revealing of that composition in the foreground?
Yeah, so I think it's really, really important that the landscape feature brings the sky down to a level that we understand and connects us to that. And I typically do not use artificial light at night in my images. I guess, as a dark sky advocate, artificial light should be used only when necessary and only when needed at night. And so I find that I get more enjoyment and fulfillment out of using natural sources of light to illuminate my foreground. And like I mentioned, a crescent moon is really going to give you the best of both worlds. So you can see the Milky Way and the foreground with the moonlight instead of having to use artificial light at night to illuminate it. Also, it works way better. So I would not have been able to light paint the whole canyon of Dead Horse Point. So you can do that on like a tree that's near you, but you're really not going to be able to get those large scale foreground elements with just artificial light painting. So yes, hugely important to think about your foreground. And in terms of alignment, there are some great apps for that. I don't tend to use apps though, because I think it's more fun to use your knowledge of the night sky and how it changes throughout the year. So like I mentioned, when you're shooting early season Milky Way, you can always plan for the core to be southeast. And then as we progress throughout the year, that's going to move more south to southwest. And so just kind of having that knowledge in the back of your mind allows you to plan those shots without having to calculate it using apps or anything. But I will say that, I have hiked miles into the darkness to take a shot that I thought was going to be aligned, which was totally not. So I totally understand the value of those apps, but for me, I like the fun mystery of the reveal of what am I going to see and trying to use my own knowledge.
Yeah, and that's really important too. For when we come to Grand Canyon, even you're not the knowledge of the center of the Milky Way being in the south is very important, so that if you want to get the Grand Canyon in the foreground and have the Milky Way in the south, you're likely going to want to be on the north rim of the canyon so that you can be looking south. Whereas when you're on the south rim of the canyon, you're going to have to turn your camera to the south, and therefore the Grand Canyon's behind you and you can't see it. So those type of decisions are, like you're saying, really important for when you want to go out into the field and actually shoot. So thanks for bringing those to us today. And lastly, I kind of just wanted to ask, what is, we mentioned in your bio, the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative. What is that, and what do they do, and what did you do while you were with them?
Yeah, so that was actually started through the National Park Service, who has always been an incredible champion of dark skies. Chad Moore and Bob Meadows were some of the original founders of that. And the aim is really to connect dark sky conservation on a landscape scale. So light pollution doesn't respect borders, it doesn't respect state lines. And the Colorado Plateau has some of the darkest skies above some of the most beautiful, pristine landscapes in the world remaining today. So the goal of the Colorado Plateau is to connect those dark sky efforts across time and space, and to unite them in a way that promotes the dark skies for the Colorado Plateau economy, for the tourism, for the people, and also helps protect it into the future. And there's actually been another cooperative started, which is the Basin and Range Dark Sky Cooperative. And ideally, we would love to see dark sky cooperatives existing across the entire world. So
shout out to Ashley Pipkin.
Exactly. We got Ashley Pipkin on the Basin and Range, and Aubrey Larson is now leading the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative. So please check those out. cpdarkskies.org is the Colorado Plateau website. And yeah, we really just work to promote dark skies along the Colorado Plateau. One of my favorite things that I got to do when I worked there is we did a tour with the Utah Symphony around different dark sky park areas and had star parties after each of the symphonic concerts, which also related to the night sky. And it was a lovely way to connect people around the Colorado Plateau with arts, culture, and dark skies. So.
Well, excellent. That sounds awesome. And hopefully we can do stuff like that, more of that stuff on site at places like Grand Canyon next year. Next year's Grand Canyon Star Party is June 5th through the 12th, 2021. So cross your fingers, everybody, mark your calendars that we'll be able to celebrate that on site next year. Hopefully you all will be able to meet Betty Maya in person. She was planning on giving some astrophotography workshops, night sky photography workshops on site this year, but hopefully we can get her next year and you can enjoy the night with her and learn from her expertise in shooting the night skies. Stay tuned for the virtual telescope viewing session that's going to premiere right after this program. And in the meantime, I wish everybody clear dark skies, be safe, be healthy. Betty Maya, thanks so much for joining us. It was really a great honor. You're a true ally to Night Skies, so we're really honored to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope you all have clear skies tonight for shooting.